Hello, everybody. It is Thursday night. Welcome to the Hammer and Nail Show. I'm Jack Hammer from the Santa Rosa Press Democrat. And as with me, as always, on the other part, since I'm the Hammer, we got to have the Nail, and that's Jessie Naylor, who's next to me from Last Second Sports. How you doing tonight, Jessie?
I'm doing fantastic, Jack. I am glad to be back doing Hammer and Nails with you. We were off last week, but we're back at it. And a lot's happened since the last time we talked. I mean, Deebo Samuel is going to be a 49er for the foreseeable future. I think that's some pretty big news. And training camp's been going like crazy. So I'm excited to talk about it.
Yeah, unfortunately, we didn't get to do the show last Thursday because I got stuck in traffic coming back from training camp. That's why we had to cancel it out. You had some other things that you were doing also that evening afterwards, so just didn't work out for us. We had a little conflict, and I'm going to tell you what, it's a lot of fun going to training camp. I remember now why I don't like Bay Area traffic. I haven't been. It's last year was not as bad as this because I think everybody was still dealing with COVID. Now COVID's gone away for the most part, and everybody's on the road. So poor me, get to go to 49ers practice every day. All right.
Yeah, I feel so sorry for you.
That's just a few folks over in the comment section. We got a bunch of them over there already. We have Andrew who says, this is why I was chuckling when the show started. He said, hit that like button. If you can't do it for Jack, do it for Jimmy. Okay. Dan says, Jimmy Two Thumbs. That's right. And then we got Dan Rostek, who's a member of the Toolbox. That's why he's got that little dollar sign next to his name. So if you want to join, you absolutely can. What's up, Jack, Jessie, and everyone? Good to have you on board, Dan. Not sure what this one means, but Luke says, where's the carpentry crew? Oh, maybe because it's Hammer and Nails. I got it. I'm a little slow. I'm a slow.
Come on. You're like the king of dad jokes. What are you talking about? You should have picked up on that one right away.
I know. Last Friday, I went to the Mystery Spot, which is up in Santa Cruz. I don't know if you've ever been there, if you've heard of it or whatever. But I got to say, if you're a fan of dad jokes, you got to go to the Mystery Spot in Santa Cruz because the entire tour is like jam packed with dad jokes, and they're bad, but I liked them. Perfect. It was fun. The Moon Man says, Jack and Jessie, little fire emoji. What's good, guys? Love the content, brothers. Go Niners. Thank you, Moon Man. Itchy says, two awesome dudes. Oh, that's one awesome dude and me.
I thought you were going to go the other way with that one. I would have.
Dad says, who else brought their popcorn? You must have seen a little bit of what we started talking about on Twitter today. Bomber T says, hey, Jack, has Trey's touch gotten any better with short passes? I'm having flashbacks of Kaepernick. Yeah, I would say it's better than it was last year. That's not my biggest concern with what I've seen so far. We have Keith who says, congrats to Bryant Young, who is going into the Pro Football Hall of Fame today. Or this weekend, awesome. Not today, but this weekend. So that's awesome. And then Bomber wants to say hi to Jessie too. I guess he doesn't like me, but he wants to say hi to you. So that's good. I love you too, Bomber. Good to have you on board. But yeah, let's get this thing started. Let's get. If you don't have your popcorn ready, you should probably get it because we're going to talk about everybody's favorite discussion around the 49ers, which is quarterbacks. I got myself into a little bit of hot water last night when I decided to tweet out the numbers for Trey Lance from last year compared to this year. You know, last year during training camp, nearly 70% completion rate, only 4 interceptions throughout camp, 12 touchdowns, which was a pretty high number. And then we go into this year right now, about 51% completion rate, 50.5. He's already up to 4 touchdowns or 4 interceptions. Excuse me. He's got 4 passing touchdowns, a rushing touchdown. Go ahead. Tell me what you think of those numbers, Jessie.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, you know, if you're comparing number to number, it's not near what it was last year. But, you know, I tweeted out something a couple of days ago, and it was in response to Quincy Avery, still kind of is the personal quarterback coach for Trey Lance. And he said something along the lines of, like, we got to stop going in on, he was just talking about football players in general. But we got to stop going in on these players when they mess up in practice or whatever is happening in practice, because that's their time to make mistakes, right? Like that's their time to learn. And so it just reminded me of something that Fred Warner had said last year. And so I went and dug that up, and Fred basically was talking about, and by the way, what we later found out was this is around the time that Trey Lance, those practice videos leaked. Right, where he started to kind of figure it out in practice. But essentially what he was saying is you're trying to be too perfect, kid. Like you're not giving us the looks that we need. Like we need to learn how to track the ball in tight situations, and we're not able to do that. And you're not willing to make any mistakes. So how are you going to improve? Like, how are you ever going to know what you can fit the ball into? Like what is open in the NFL if all you're doing is taking safe passes and then running the ball every time we're practicing, right? And so this was much later in the year where he had already been in the league for, many months at this point, and he still was playing it safe. And so what ended up coming from that, at least according to Fred Warner, is that he started to let loose a little bit, and they started to see these wow throws from Trey Lance. And I find it interesting because I remember when those videos were released of practice, I talked about how that was one of the things that I thought that did concern me about Trey Lance, is that he would be too conservative. Because yes, he has a big arm, and yes, he can run, and he has all the athletic ability, but he is a conservative player. And although that's great that he protects the football at a high level, it also means that some of those big plays might be left on the table because he won't be willing to make them. And I think we're starting to see that shift from him. I think the team started to see that shift from him last year. And I think that he is probably doing the same things right now. He's learning what's open, what's not open. Maybe in a situation where he would normally run the ball, he's like, whatever, you know what? I'm just going to throw this one up and let's see what happens. And I think what's cool and what's coming out of that is I think Brandon Ayuk is emerging because of that. He's winning a lot of 50-50 balls. Sounds like he is the leader in the clubhouse for training camp MVP, if you will. And, and what's happening is maybe Trey Lance isn't completing some of the passes that he would if he was playing it safe. But I think he's getting himself more prepared for what he can get away with in the NFL. And, my concern would be if he was still playing it safe on a regular basis, sure, the numbers might look better. Maybe he completes 60, 65%, what have you. But would he be preparing himself to really play in this league? I don't know. I don't know the answer to that. But I am confident that he's learning what he can get away with and what he can't. And, he'll learn more and more throughout the year as well.
Yeah, I think he's definitely learning some things as they go through camp. And, for me, when I look at, and I mentioned this yesterday on my post practice article, is, the thing right now is we're seeing splash plays from him. You can turn on YouTube. It's easy for everybody to see the good plays from Trey Lance. Those are all over Twitter. Right now, I don't know if the 49ers are better at the quarterback position than they were a year ago. I don't know that enough. I haven't seen enough yet. And it's one thing to be taking chances down the field. I get it. You want to see those chances going up. What's more concerning to me is the open throws that are just being missed. When I say being missed, I'm talking about with the accuracy and those kind of things. And it's hard to get in, and I do have to admit, and it is hard to get a gauge on where Trey Lance is right now, because we haven't seen a practice yet in which they've actually tried to move the ball and they've asked him to get first downs and they've asked him to do those kind of things. And the offense as a whole right now just is really herky jerky. It's fits and it's start and stop all the way. And that's what we saw last year in both of his starts to an extent. And we're seeing it right now play out in practice. And I'm looking forward to the point when we get into training camp where they actually try to move the ball down the field so we can see if this offense can move. Because, Trey Lance has had 2 good back-to-back practices in the red zone. He's got 4 touchdowns, 1 interception. Actually, 5 touchdowns if you include the rushing touchdown the other day. He was good in the red zone last year during training camp. When I look at the 49ers offense right now, my biggest concern is, can they get to the red zone? Because I don't know if I haven't seen them look consistent enough with what they've been doing to put back-to-back plays together that makes you think that there's anything smooth about what they're doing.
But that's interesting, because last year when he did play, it was almost the opposite, at least in the Arizona game. they were able to move the ball at will in between the 20s, and then they would just stall out, right? And so it'll be interesting to see. And it's what happens every year. Like, teams change and problems become different, right? And I've talked about this. Last year's 49ers, they were a quarterback away from winning a Super Bowl. We don't know what this year's 49ers are, right? Are they still a quarterback away because Trey hasn't developed all the way? Or are they an offensive line away? We don't know. We don't know the answer to these questions. And, we'll find out. Like, maybe they have too many injuries this year, and that's why they don't win, or who knows, right? Like, there's so much that we're going to have to go through throughout the season. But, it's funny because I think everybody looks at last year's problem and says, okay, well, if Trey's as good as you say he is, they should just win a Super Bowl. And it's like, well, hold on. That was last year's team. That was last year's problem. This year's problem might be something completely different, entirely different. And so it'll be interesting to see, like, as the year progresses or as training camp progresses, what the actual issues of this team are. There's a lot of strengths. We definitely know that. There is a lot of strengths, defense being one of them. And we'll see how far it can take them ultimately, and when Trey does start to hit his stride and all those other things. So it'll be interesting to see.
Yeah, I think there's definitely a ton of talent. You look around on the field and it pops out at you. It's all over the place. I just, I get everybody wants Trey Lance to be really good. I totally get it, and I think he's going to be good. I've told you that we've talked about that on the show. My prediction is that by the end of the season, his numbers are going to be better than what we saw from Jimmy Garoppolo last year, because he's going to have a higher yards per attempt and all that kind of stuff, net yards and all those types of things. But I just don't right now. It's hard to say that he's there. You go from 69% to 50%, and that's a big drop. And it's not just the offensive line, which I know is a bit of an issue. It's not just the receivers. It's Trey Lance too, with just not being able to get the ball. I would say that I don't have this written down. I don't have this documented 100%, but the way that thinking about the way that this training camp has gone, for all of the big plays that we've seen out of Trey Lance, we've seen a really ugly play. And then you have the ones in the middle. And that's kind of what I would say. And I think that is partly why you see him at 50.5% completion percentage.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. It's tough, like, because I'm not there, right? Like, it's hard for me to take a stance or say one way or another. I did listen to, I talked to Grant. Obviously, he was in a space earlier today, and then Rohan came in, which was interesting because I had reached out to both of them when you and I were talking on Twitter, and I asked them, like, how many drops has there been? Like, am I off my rocker? And they both ended up tweeting it out, which was cool. And there was a major discrepancy there. And they talked through that discrepancy right there in the space. And essentially, the discrepancy was this. Grant's looking at it and saying, listen, if the ball's in a receiver's hands and it gets knocked out, but when it should have been a clear catch, I'm counting that as a drop. And Rohan's going, well, I'm going the opposite way. But they both agreed that really, regardless of how you look at it, Rohan had, I think it was 6 drops and 8 PBUs or something like that. So 14 total. Either way, that was 14 passes that were on target, right? That aren't going to show up in a completion percentage. And I think fans already look at completion percentage, and that's how they gauge an accurate quarterback. And that's not necessarily the case. I mean, I don't think Jimmy's the most accurate quarterback, right? He always has a high completion percentage. It's because he doesn't take a lot of chances. I don't think his ball placement's been the best. And I also think that Trey Lance is going to struggle with some accuracy things. I mean, he's reworking a throwing motion, right? I think that's something he's going to have to work on. But when I hear 50% completion, I know from what everybody's reporting, including yourself, he's been more accurate than a 50% completion. How much more accurate? I mean, that's up for debate. But 50% completion it can be a misleading stat if there's no context to it, was basically my whole argument or my whole point today.
Yeah, and the one thing that I'll push back on it is last season in training camp, he had drops, he had pass breakups, and he was at 69.4%. And that's with the drops and the pass breakups and everything else. He wasn't playing with the starter, so probably there was more drops last year. I don't know. I'd have to go back and, I wasn't at every practice last year. I definitely wasn't there as often as I've been there this year. So that's the thing with it, though, when you start to look at it. And then in terms of the drops, I've seen the reports of the drops, and if a receiver catches the ball and it's a deep shot down the left sideline to Brandon Ayuk, and he has to jump up, and the ball's in a good place, but he's got to jump up. And as he's coming down, Emmanuel Mosley knocks the ball out of his hands. That's not a drop. If we were at the end of the season, if you were to look at the stats, that would not be recorded as a drop. A drop would be if he's running a route, the ball hits him in his hands and he falls down. Similar, like what happened to Elijah Mitchell yesterday, where he's running a little in route from the left side, ball hits him in the hands and he drops it. That's a flat out drop. Or when yesterday when Brock Purdy hit Austin Mack in the hands, it bounces off of his chest into the hands of Yamada Lenore for an interception. That's a drop, and it's also a pick that shouldn't belong to the quarterback, even though he gets dinged for it. So it all plays out. It all ends up in the at the end of the day, it all kind of washes. It all comes together in the wash, I guess is the term. We'll see how this plays out. Like I also said, though, I'm not going to sugarcoat what I think is happening, because again, he makes some really fantastic throws. The throw to Brandon Ayuk yesterday for the touchdown was a really nice play. When he threw the ball, I didn't think it was going to be caught. It looked like he was throwing it out of bounds, but it was just enough in bounds to where Ayuk was able to make the catch for the touchdown. Fantastic. The deep shot to Brandon Ayuk that everybody's seen down the right sideline where he goes up and he's able to catch it over the top of Charvarius Ward. You can't put the ball in any better spot than that. The throw to Deebo Samuel just a couple days ago, where Samuel catches the ball in between three defenders on a crossing route, which is like what we've seen the 49ers run a lot with their other quarterback over the last 3 years. I mean, he just put that thing on a rope right to him, and you can't do it any better. But then you also have the out routes that are consistently high and behind the receiver. You have check down routes that are not hitting the running backs, where the running backs are having to grab like this and those kind of things. And I guess you could call those drops too, but it's not an accurate pass. No, it's a bit of a work in progress with Lance. And more than anything, though, I like I said, this isn't a me saying that you need to pull the panic button or push the panic button at all. We're 7 days into camp. This is what is happening. And I'm not going to make excuses for what's happening on the field. And I don't have any skin in the game. If Trey Lance does great, awesome. If Trey Lance sucks, whatever. And I've said that I'll be wrong if he doesn't do good. And so obviously you want him to do good, but that's just kind of where I am with him.
Yeah, I mean, and I think that's fair, right? Like I think both things can be true. I think that the defense can be really good. The offensive line can struggle. And Trey Lance has some things that he can work on too, right? Like it can all be true. Like it doesn't have to be, hey, Trey is doing XYZ only because his offensive line can't protect, or only because the defense is really good. But on the flip side, it's also, well, it's, he's missing throws and it's only because of that. Like both things can be true. And I think I don't have an issue. I've never had an issue with the way that you report. I think that you just kind of say what you see, right? And some people don't like that. Some people do, but like knowing you and talking to you, I think that's the way you've always been. I did feel like with that tweet though, you left out some context, and I think you wanted an engagement with it. That was just me being honest about the situation, right? Like, because there certainly is context that's left out, context that I know that exists, but you're like, let me just float this one out there, right? Might get a little panic from these guys, and that's what happened. I mean, that's ultimately exactly what happened with that tweet.
Yeah, no, and really, here's the thing. I know some people have been able to set up their Twitter where they get tips and all that kind of stuff. I don't get jack diddly squat from my engagement on Twitter. The only place I get paid for my engagement is here. I don't get paid for it on Twitter. And so, I've heard, I had a guy that does write up, he does a podcast, and he for the 49ers, I think he does some stuff for Niner Nation, tell me that I'm trying to get engagement. I don't really give a rat's patootie about engagement on Twitter. I say what I see and say what I feel. And if you like it, cool. If you don't like it, fine. I'll talk to you about it and I'll disagree with you, or we can have a conversation back and forth on Twitter. It's fine. We're not always going to be able to get on shows like this, right? And so that's just the way that I've always approached it. I didn't do it for engagement. I was trying to. Here's the thing with me: Jimmy Garoppolo is not the starting quarterback of the 49ers anymore. It's Trey Lance. I don't care how Trey Lance compares to Jimmy Garoppolo in any way, shape, or form. And so I'm comparing Trey Lance to Trey Lance. And that's all that was about. This is where he was. This is where he is. Yes, there can be some discussion about how we get to those numbers, but at the end of the day, those are the numbers. And is he going to improve? Maybe. Is he going to be that number all the way through and the 49ers offense is going to struggle? Maybe. I don't know. We're 7 practices in, over a month away from the start of the season. This is where they are right now. I also said earlier this week that I felt like the 49ers offense has the rhythm of Elaine Bennis, and that's kind of goes, I think, hand in hand a little bit.
That was pretty funny, actually. Let me ask you a very black and white question here, very straight up.
Sure.
Do you think, take everything into account that you've seen, heard, all of that, do you think that Trey Lance is worse today than he was a year ago?
I don't know. He's not worse today than he was a year ago. I don't know if he's much better yet than he was a year ago. The biggest difference between Trey Lance now and Trey Lance in 2021 is that he's now playing with the starters. We went back and forth repeatedly last year about this during training camp, whether he should start or not start. And the conversation was always about the numbers, because we kept getting the numbers on a daily basis without the context that everybody wants now. And that's, again, if you were looking just at the numbers last year and you were seeing he's 69%, his numbers are better than Jimmy Garoppolo. I can't tell you how many times I've heard today or seen today on Twitter, well, he's playing against the starters. Yeah, I know. Last year he was playing against the backups. That's partly why although his numbers were better, they were against backups. And you got to take that into consideration. And I think that some people don't want to do that, because everybody wants Trey Lance to succeed, other than about 5 guys.
Yes. To say, I don't know about everybody.
No, but you know what I mean. You know where I'm going for. Like, for sure. If you're a 49ers fan, you want to have Trey Lance succeed, unless there's something else some other agenda that you've got. And so I can understand why people would push back on what I'm saying. I don't think that a lot of what I'm writing or saying is a lot different than what most other people are saying. I just don't think it's that much different. I think maybe I come across a little bit differently with the way that I put it out there.
Yeah, I mean, that's fair. Like I said, I don't think you're being unfair. I don't think you're saying anything that's untrue, right? Mm-hmm. And I think that if you get any long form content, I do think that you give plenty of context to everything, right? You're just, again, calling it how you see it. I just felt like that one. I was like, Yeah. But either way, you know what I mean? And let me be clear. I know that you don't get paid off Twitter. And I hate when people say that about me, like, you're just trying to get clicks. I'm like, clicks on what? You clicking on this tweet and responding to me does what? Where do I get paid? Show me where that income check is, because I don't see it. Maybe there's something I don't know about, and you have the secret sauce. So I didn't mean it in that way.
No, that's fine.
I guess what I should have said is
I didn't take.
You shouldn't be surprised by the responses with the lack of context, I guess, is where I'm going with that.
I didn't take yours that way. I just kind of threw it. I combined yours in with, with the whole thing, this whole click. Because every time somebody sees, come on, realistically, 90% of the time when somebody sees something on Twitter that they don't like or doesn't match up with their point of view, what do they say?
Clicks, engagement.
No, there's one word that everybody says. Every time, if they don't like it, it is clickbait. That is the term for anything that you don't like. Anything that somebody's challenging your point of view, it's clickbait. And
or slander. People love the word slander too.
Slander. I had to look that up because I saw you talking about that, and you're right. There's a lot of times when people are saying slander, and it's not really necessarily slanderous. It's just
what are you talking about?
Whatever you want to say, but it's not slanderous on this stuff. Yeah.
Whatever. All I'm saying is just keep doing what you're doing. You and I are going to battle it out regardless, and then we're going to talk about it on the show, and it's always going to be fun. That's and you're right. Or hater, that's another one.
Yeah,
those are always the ones. It's funny. Either way, it's all in good fun. I'm glad that we can talk about it on the show. I think, to your point, talking about it through characters on Twitter, you don't get the full context regardless of how much you try to put out there. And going back and forth with someone, you're not getting tone of voice. You're not getting there's a lot of things that are missing. And so it is nice because I know that when we engage on Twitter, even if we're on completely opposite sides of it, we get to talk it out and we get to see where we're actually coming from. Right. And we still may not agree, but at least we heard each other out. Right. And I think that's what's cool about this show.
So if you're watching the show on Twitter right now, I do have it linked over there, and you're watching the show on Twitter and you don't like what I'm saying on my tweets, when I do a call-in show, call me up and you can argue with me there and we can have a conversation.
Exactly.
But as Daniel says here, I got to pull this one up. He wants to know if we're trying to get elected. And Jesse's trying to be the president of the Trey Lance fan club. Yes.
What do you mean? I'm the owner. I'm the president. I am. I'm a member. I'm all of the above. What are you talking about?
Like I said last year, you're getting paid to be his PR guy. I still want to find out how much he's paying you to be his PR guy.
That's true. Twitter doesn't pay me, but being the leader of the Trey Lance fan club absolutely pays these bills. No doubt about it.
Oh, man. Dan, who is the member on the toolbox, I'm going to pull it up. He says, Jack, if Trey failed this year, what do you think that would look like? I think that a failure for Trey Lance is, less than what he did last year. Last year he was at 59% completion rate. If he's in the lower 50s, if he's throwing a bunch of picks, we know he's going to throw some interceptions more than he's going to throw more interceptions than he did in college. But it's just going to be part of the deal. I think that if the 49ers are losing games, and a big reason of it is because the quarterback is not playing well or he's missing plays that should be made, then that's when you're going to say that it was a failure on his part. But again, like, I tweeted this out as well, and I've said it so many times to you, Jesse, is that it's not just about the quarterback. Nothing that really happens is just only about the quarterback. There's so many other things that go into it. Some other than like the Tennessee game, right? That's all about the quarterback. When you miss a guy that's wide open down the sidelines and you airmail him by 15 yards, or you throw a pick in the end zone, that's just a bad play. Now that's when you can say that game was lost by the quarterback. But most of the time, it's a lot of things that go into it.
Yeah, absolutely. No doubt about it. And I would say if he doesn't show improvement, right? Like Jack's talking about, I'm not sure he's better right now. And we're not really going to know until he plays. But if from week 1 to week 18, he stays the same, that would worry me, because I've always said this about all players, not just quarterbacks. I feel like all players deserve 3 years, like truly 3 years. At the end of year 3, we know what you are, regardless. Now, some players show that earlier, some regress, some progress, whatever. But for the most part, by the end of year 3, we know what you are, and we want to see glimpses and flashes, and we want to feel encouraged. And if Trey Lance is the same quarterback in week 18 as he is week 1, even if he looked good in week 1, I'm a little concerned. I want to see the progression, and I think we will. And I think that's, for me, that's all I need to be encouraged about what Trey Lance's future is going to be. And then building upon that going into his 3rd year, which is the make or break year for me, and knowing what you are, we'll see. We'll see what it is, right? I don't think we're truly going to know for sure until the end of 2023. And I know that's a long time to wait, but that's just the reality of the situation.
No, that's about right. It's usually around 32, 34 or something like that. Once you get into the 30s in terms of starts, that's when quarterbacks are like pitchers. You do your thing, the league adjusts. You need to be able to readjust a little bit and those kind of things. And we'll find out as we go through this with Lance. And and I don't want to be totally negative. Like I said, he's had some really good moments in camp. He's had some really good throws. His practice a couple days ago was 10 of 17, but I felt like he was better than that number, even that number to an extent. I want to see him run some move the ball period stuff because they've only done it a little bit a couple days ago for 5 plays. And we saw them get into a 3rd and 9 situation and Lance complete a throw to Ayuk on the left side to move the sticks. And I want to see them have to try to work their way down the field. And I want to see how much different that looks than last year. Because when you did it last year in training camp, it was really, again, herky-jerky, which I mean, it's kind of like, just not in rhythm, right? And I want to see what that looks like with him. And I want to see if it's different than it was a year ago. And I want to see the offense actually work their way down the field instead of just staying in the same spot and working on, I understand the reason why you work on 2nd and 10 and 3rd and 5 and that kind of stuff. But I want to see them put it together. I think we'll probably do that this week, before they get to, as they get ready to take on the Packers week 1 preseason.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's got to be a part of things real soon here. So looking forward to that for sure. Just looking forward to Debo getting out there, looking forward to the offensive line, regardless. And, it sounds like we're about to transition into some of it, but they got to figure out who the starting offensive linemen are going to be 1 through 5, left to right. Like they got to figure that out because they got to get some continuity before the season starts or it could get ugly. So
they do. And then we can go ahead and talk about the offensive line right now too. Cause again, it's not time to push the panic button even there. They have them over a month. We're over a month away from week 1 of the regular season. They got 3 preseason games and then 17 days off in between before their first one even. So there's a long way to go. I told you before the show, my biggest surprise really in camp when it comes to the offensive side of the ball was the fact that they decided to have a competition at center. It kind of takes the whole offense of line and it changes some things around. Now you've got, instead of having just a change at center, now you have a change at right guard. And left guard was Aaron Banks, so that's a change as well. And the only 2 guys that you have around are McGlinchey and Williams, who actually have both looked pretty good. McGlinchey's looking really good in his recovery.
Yeah, absolutely. And I agree with you, by the way. It's not just the competition. It's, to your point, the competition with Brunskill being a part of it, because I think that we all assumed that Brunskill was going to be the starting right guard. And yes, there was going to be changes at center and left guard, but we knew that was coming. So now the surprise is, oh gosh, there's also a change at right guard. And so they're remaking the whole thing on the fly. This is interesting, right? And so, I think that shocked everybody. And I think that there are a lot of people that were concerned about the offensive line as is, thought that players like J.C. Treader should be in a Niner uniform or they should kick the tires on a player like that. And then when they remake also the right guard position and work all the way through, and then they don't know for sure who the center is, I think, I understand why people have some panic over this whole thing. I mean, this is a position that Kyle Shanahan himself has said is the heartbeat of the offense. Well, if it's the heartbeat of the offense, why are we in year 6 of this regime and we have not figured out this position and we don't even know who the starter is going to be for this season coming up? That's crazy.
Well, it's the same. That's kind of the same thing though as our conversation a couple of weeks ago where Kyle Shanahan and John Lynch have talked on and on about the need to have a strong backup quarterback, and you're going to go into this offseason this year with the group that they have behind Trey Lance. So right, it all kind of goes together. I just find it interesting. We had talked about it, and it's kind of played out the way that I thought it would if they went ahead and moved Brunskill into at the center spot, because it's with the exception of Jalen Moore not really getting reps at right guard. He's only been getting reps at tackle. And Spencer Burford is a pretty good right guard. Jalen Moore is not a good right tackle.
And he shouldn't be playing right tackle. I mean, Shanahan again himself after the draft, when they drafted Moore, was like, oh, he's a guard. And then last year he ended up playing some tackle. some spot duty, and then we figured, okay, this year he'll be a guard, and he hasn't been a guard yet. So it's like, okay, is he going to be able to play his natural position? Like, what's going on here? The good news is it sounds like Burford stepped in and done a good job there. Mm-hmm. So right guard should be as good, hopefully even better than last year. And they're still figuring out ultimately the two positions that we knew they'd be figuring out. We know that Banks is going to be the starter at left guard. And then that center position, what are they going to do? So based off of what you've seen so far, Jack, who do you think, crystal ball, you had to predict, who's going to start at center when week 1 rolls around?
The feeling to me is that it's going to be Brunskill. I don't think you have him doing that role unless you want him to be the guy that wins the job, but he needs to win it. He needs to show that he's better than Brendel. I don't know if he's really showed. I think you have two guys that are pretty similar in Brendel and Brunskill at center. I don't think there's a clear-cut difference between the two, at least at this point. I wanted to ask Michael Lynch that question yesterday, whether or not, like, how is the communication along the offensive line with the rotation at center? Because one group of reps, it'll be Brendel, and then they step off, and the next time the starter step on, it's Brunskill. And for a guy like McGlinchey and everybody else, is the communication, is there an issue in communication at all that's causing some of the breakdowns? And I probably wouldn't get a totally 100% honest answer on that, but because they don't want to give away any secrets or throw somebody into the bus. But that's I think a concern for me.
Yeah, absolutely. And I really expect, like, these next 2 days for practice are going to be big in my mind, because now they've had a day off to kind of collect things. They've had a couple days of pads. McGlinchey should be full go. Debo should be full go tomorrow and the next day, I would imagine. And so I'm curious to see how these next couple days play out for everybody across the board. I think we might learn a lot over these next 2 practices, but we'll see. I feel like some of those guys that have been in and out and they've been kind of easing in, sounds like they've come away relatively healthy and are looking good and starting to get in shape. So let's see what this actually looks like. Let's see what this offense fully looks like when everybody's out there playing.
Absolutely. And then really quick before we move off of the offensive line, Swan Song, another member of the toolbox, he comes in and he says, "Hey Jack, how are they with the snaps?" They're okay. I think when you look at it, Daniel Brunskill, he has had a few times. Daniel Brunskill, more than Jake Brendel, has had issues with his snaps. When it comes to the snaps, if you want to just look at the snaps and who's been more consistent with it, it's definitely been Jake Brendel. Daniel Brunskill's had a couple of them. The other day, he had a couple back-to-back snaps that were not on the mark, so left a little bit to be desired. So that is a piece of the puzzle, I think, there too.
Yeah, absolutely.
The other spot along the offense is at running back, and that's a I don't know if we've really gotten any clarity around the running back room yet, but I do have to say it was fun to watch Tyrion Davis-Price run with pads on the other day for the first time. That was good. The guy was out there running people over left and right, at least the first day in pads that I saw him on Tuesday.
Yeah, for sure. And okay, so when you look at the running back position, I think it seems like Shanahan has a soft spot for Hasty. He tends to always somehow make it right and be a third down back and what have you. And he is a little bit different player than some of those guys. I think it's starting to become a little bit more of a clear picture that Wilson probably isn't going to make this team. I mean, it sounds like he's had yet another setback, and it's very unfortunate for him. And he really, from what I've heard, hasn't regained that explosion after that injury last year. And so sounds like he might be an odd man out. But with Mason coming on, knowing that Hasty is liked, how do you expect this running back room to shape up? Come week 1 again, give me your crystal ball. Who are the 4 that are on this roster?
Well, it's going to be Elijah Mitchell. He's one. Tyrion Davis-Price. Those 2. I think Sermon's on the roster, and I think Jeff Wilson Jr. is the 4th guy.
Really?
And the reason I say Jeff Wilson Jr. is because he can do multiple things for you. He can play halfback. He can play fullback. He plays special teams. He can do all those things. And right now, Jeff Wilson Jr. is healthy. And when Jeff Wilson Jr. is healthy, he's a good running back. And he being able to do as much as he can, he's an under. I think he's also a little bit of an underrated receiver. I just think that
I agree.
I think that a guy like Jeff Wilson allows the 49ers to do everything that they want to do without having to change anything. Whereas with JaMycal Hasty, that requires you to kind of change what you're doing, because he's not going to. When JaMycal Hasty comes on the field, you're not really not so much worried about the interior run, and you pretty much, if you're on the defensive side, I don't think you're really worried about JaMycal Hasty being the guy that's going to run through you.
Absolutely. But I thought I had heard, maybe I heard wrong, but I thought Wilson had another setback. Something came up.
I don't know about that. I know that he missed practice a couple of days ago, but okay. There's a constant rotation of guys in terms of practicing and not practicing, but I don't know of any injury. And I got to say really quick, we talk about a lot of stuff on the show, and this isn't even about Jeff Wilson Jr. This is about me being a screw up, right? So you saw the report from Cam Inman about Jordan Matthews' injury. Mm-hmm. I felt I dropped the ball on that so bad, because we are walking in from practice. There's a 49ers player walking out of the building in crutches to get in a car. And instead of finding out who it was, I just walked into the media room for the press conference. And it's one of those things where you see these guys with their uniforms on, you know who their numbers are, some of their faces you recognize, but I saw it and I blew it by not getting the story. And it's a learning experience for sure.
Yeah, those things happen. You're still early in your career with this stuff, but yeah, definitely that's one of those things. Like, dang, I could have been the one to break that.
And I feel bad for him, because Jordan Matthews was having a heck of a preseason. I know that a lot of what he was doing was against the 2s and the 3s, but still, the guy was making big catches over the middle. All over the field, really. And he had done it going back to OTAs and minicamp. And maybe he was on the verge of challenging for a roster spot. The Niners were going to keep him around one way or another. And I feel really bad for him, because the guy was, anytime you have an injury like that, especially for a guy that's on the fringe, every time somebody gets hurt, it's a bad deal. But when it's a guy that's on the fringe and those guys aren't making millions of dollars like like some of the others, that's a bad deal for him.
Yeah, it does suck, and him and Hurst both ultimately don't really, their injuries don't impact the 49ers as far as long-term success or success this season for the most part. But it still is, again, you get into the personal element, and these are human beings and they're fighting for their careers, and it's unfortunate, man. That definitely sucks.
Yeah, it does. It really does. And then really quick before we get into the defense stuff, because I know we're running short on time, but I know we want to hit on some defensive stuff too. Go back to the quarterback stuff. BMAC, thank you very much for the super chat. Says, is Lance playing more aggressive this training camp? I asked because of Warner's conversation last offseason. And I saw your comment earlier. Jessie and I had discussed it already. We had moved on. But definitely, I think, is he playing more aggressive because of that? I think maybe that might be part of it. You take the shots, and I don't have a problem with him taking deep shots. I don't have a problem with any of the things that he's doing like, for example, Nate Sudfeld's interception that everybody has seen by Travaris Ward, where he gets up over the top of Ray McLeod. I didn't like that interception. I get it in practice to an extent, because he was open deep. He take the shot. He had a tight end wide open over the middle that would have picked up probably about 50 yards if he had thrown it to him, because there's nobody around. And then you underthrow the ball on top of it, and you get a pick. That's where I would be upset. Like, if I saw Trey Lance doing something like that, then I might say maybe he's being overly aggressive. I don't think he's been overly aggressive. I think he's taken some shots, and it's not even necessarily a situation where his checkdowns, he should be checking it down. Sometimes he's taking these shots, and for me, when it comes to the stuff with Trey Lance that concerns me, it's the 15-yard out that's not close. It's the 5-yard in that just misses the receiver. It's the check down that is inaccurate, and the running backs having to reach different ways. Those are the ones that concern me more than anything else.
One thing it does sound like is happening though is it, and it's interesting because I heard Crocker talking about this yesterday or the day before, that Greg Pinelli, one of the quarterback coaches that he's in close contact with, says that Trey Lance doesn't have a change of pace when it comes to some of those quick throws, right? Where mostly every other quarterback can catch it, whether they got their hands on the laces or not, they can flick it out there real quick. And it seems like Trey still keeps his same motion all the way through, which is already a longer motion. And then when you got it, you need it on a quick play, that's not necessarily the best thing. But, and I've heard you talk about he's missed some of these shorter throws, but it does sound like at the very least, and this was something I think early on that showed its ugly head during the preseason, and it did get better in the Texans game. It's something that we've talked about in the past, but it does sound like he's seeing the checkdowns, right? Like he's now seeing them. He's not just overlooking them. Now it's just about making the quote unquote easy throw, right?
Yeah. And it's, maybe I'm being overly harsh on him. I don't know, but it's I'm fine with being this way. We're 7 weeks in, 7 practices in. I think we've got a long ways for it to change. And I'd rather be completely honest and be blunt about it right now than trying to tell you, if you follow me and you follow the reports that I'm doing, I tell you how many passes are dropped. I tell you all those kinds of things. I get into detail. It's not just a quick, it's usually a pretty long description of what Trey Lance did. I usually give you the good, I give you the bad. And that's the way that it is. So, that's going to continue. It's not going to change. Outside of, and that's not, again, nothing that you haven't said anything that's different than that, yeah. Jesse. So I'm not saying that to you, but in terms of, let's switch base real quick over to the defensive side. What battle, because we got about 5 minutes here. What is the one position on the defensive side that you're most interested in terms of the battle?
Nickel corner. Has to be nickel corner. I mean, we're hearing how good both of the corners are on the outside. Something that I expected last year was a lot more cover one. Verrett got injured right away. Obviously, that was no longer an option. And it sounds like that's the route that they're going to want to go this year. Can they do that with the nickel position? Can any of these guys cover man to man and allow them to do what they need to do on a regular basis? What are your thoughts with that?
When it comes to the man to man stuff on the inside, that's going to be tough. I think if you're looking for a guy that's going to be able to play man in the slot, that's going to probably lean more towards Sam Womack, right? Because I think he's going to be a little bit better of the man corner guys. It's different on the inside. Kyle Shanahan talked about this earlier in the week. I think it was on Tuesday morning, about how if you're playing corner on the outside, that requires speed. That's where you got to be at the burner. If you're playing corner on the slot, you don't have to be quite as fast because you're able to use leverage one way or another and those kind of things. You're able to play at that position differently, which is partly why a guy like K'Wan Williams could do a whole bunch of different things, right? And right now, when you look at the 49ers, Sam Womack can play inside and outside. Dante Johnson can play everywhere in the secondary. Darqueze Dennard, he's a slot. So we'll see how that whole thing plays out. I think that we're early on, and I think we're seeing Womack start to push at that spot. I really like his cover ability. My only question is his ability to step in and defend against the run. Other than that, I think that Sam Womack has the ability to be everything the Fires are looking for. A guy that can do inside and outside, and is going to be able to be there for the long term.
Do you think this is the best secondary they've had in the Shanahan regime?
Yes, they're better on. This is their best group on both corners. Jimmy Ward is Jimmy Ward. He's a extremely solid safety in the middle. Do multiple things for you. You can play. He's really good at in the single high. He's really good up along the line of scrimmage. What have you. Jimmy Ward's solid. He just doesn't get the turnovers. I think that partly has to do with the pass rush and the way that they're having to play defense. So we'll see. But I really like the secondary. I'm just not sure about the guy starting next to him, but I think Hufanga along with Ward is an okay duo. I think Ward is really taking him under his wing.
Yeah, that's great to hear, and it does sound like Moore started to practice a little bit yesterday as well, and was out there looking decent. So that helps because I think they do like the 3 safety looks. They did run it quite a bit last year, and it sounds like that's something that they're looking to continue to do.
Yeah, they will. And I think yesterday, with the way that they did it, because Moore was playing safety, yesterday they had some guys out. So I think part of yesterday's practice was getting, I think what they want to do is they want to have the 1s and the 2s all kind of mix and match so that at some point, if they have to play together, they've played together. And so I think like yesterday, that's why you had Womack with the 1st. And I think that's why you had Moore, with the 1s. And I think that's also why you had Oren Burks with the starters and so on. Right. And you had some mix and match on the offensive side too, that way. I don't read too much into it, but Tarvarius Moore definitely deserves some props because he looks healthy, and the 2 interceptions he had the other day show it. Because especially the one where he got up in the air, that was a really good play that you're not going to make if you're still working your way back.
Yeah, and that's great to hear. That's definitely great to hear.
Yeah, so that's the positive, and then B-Max asking about Kinlaw. Yesterday wasn't a good day to look at that because they didn't have pads on. But I think Kinlaw's looked decent. He's looked better than Kinlaw. Javon Kinlaw has done more already this preseason than he did all last year at this point.
Physically, he looks fantastic too.
Yeah, because at this point last year, he was not playing. He was not participating in anything that had to do with contact. He was basically just doing the individual portion. He wasn't doing one-on-ones. I don't think he did one-on-ones the other day anyway, but he wasn't even getting in during the team reps until later in training camp. So he's definitely ahead of where he was. So,
well, that's good. That's great news.
Yeah. And I know, Jesse, you've got another show that's coming up. So we'll wrap it up real quick, but what have you got going on?
Yeah. Call-in show, open mic night over at Last Second Sports. That's going to start in about 5 minutes. So if you haven't gotten enough 49er talk, head on over to Last Second Sports. And like I said, call in. You don't like anything that I talked about on the show? You want to talk crap about Jack? That's cool too. Just call in.
That's right. That's right. If that's exactly it. If you don't like what Jesse has to say on Twitter, call him up and tell him that he doesn't know what the hell he's talking about. Just like you can do for me when I do one. I my schedule is extremely crammed right now with training camp and trying to manage everything else that I've got going on. And so I haven't had the time at night, but maybe when the team heads out to Minnesota, there'll be a little bit of a break and we'll do one at that point. So that'd be a great time for all of you that are watching on Twitter that don't like what I have to say to call me up and tell me that I'm full of beans. So
Dan says you need to call in and disguise your voice.
I should get like one of those voice changers.
Yeah,
and call in with like a really high pitched like Pee Wee Herman voice or something, and just give you a bad time and make you get off. See if I can get you frustrated.
Absolutely.
But I just want to say real quick, thank you to everybody in the comments section. If you're watching the show and this is the first time, or you're watching it and you haven't subscribed yet in the past, please hit that subscribe button. And once you do it, hit that little bell next to it so you don't miss any of our shows. That way you know when we're live all the time. Also hit that the like button. That helps us out for the YouTube algorithms. And then last but not least, get yourself over to 49ers.pressdemocrat.com. Those are the guys that pay my bills. So if you can get over there and make that a favorite on your web browser, that'd be fantastic. Jesse, thanks so much. And I hope you have a really good call-in show tonight.
Thank you, brother. I appreciate it. Glad to be back. Glad that we're going to be back to our normal Thursdays, Hammer and Nails. So make sure that you guys definitely tune in here. This is where we get together every Thursday. And let's get Jack to 5K. I know he's pressing up against it. Let's make it happen.
Yeah, we're getting close. It's definitely been growing the last few weeks. So if you help me out, keep it going. Get over to Jesse's channel. Have a great rest of your Thursday. Check out the channel tomorrow around about 2:30 for the practice report. Other than that, have a great rest of your Thursday and take care, everybody.